The world has been watching Iran's centrifuges, counting the days, measuring the enrichment, debating the breakout timeline. 12 days, maybe less. The entire global conversation about nuclear danger has been pointing east, toward Tehran, toward Fordo, toward the mountain with the 60-meter rock ceiling. But there is a country that already crossed that threshold decades ago. A country that already has between 170 and 200 operational nuclear warheads sitting in its arsenal right now. A country that shares a border with Iran. A country that is currently experiencing its worst economic collapse in 75 years. A country whose government has changed hands 3 times in 18 months through a combination of legal maneuvers, military pressure, and street protests that the international press covered for 48 hours and then forgot.
That country is Pakistan. And the question that nobody in any Western newsroom is asking clearly enough is this: what happens to a nuclear arsenal when the state holding it begins to come apart? Pakistan possesses an estimated 170 to 200 nuclear warheads. That figure comes not from Pakistani government disclosure. Pakistan does not disclose, but from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, the Federation of American Scientists, and the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. 3 independent bodies, 3 separate methodologies, 3 conclusions that land in the same range. To put that in context, the United Kingdom, a founding NATO member and permanent UN Security Council seat holder, possesses approximately 225 nuclear warheads. Pakistan's arsenal is not a symbolic deterrent. It is a serious, operational, continuously expanding nuclear force, and it has been expanding every year for the past decade. The delivery systems are real. Pakistan operates the Shaheen series of ballistic missiles with ranges extending from 750 kilometers to over 2,700 kilometers. That second number matters. 2,700 kilometers from Pakistani territory reaches into the heart of India, deep into Afghanistan, touches the southern edge of China, and places the entire Persian Gulf region, including every American base in Qatar, Bahrain, and the UAE, within theoretical range. Pakistan also operates nuclear-capable aircraft. The F-16s it received from the United States, the same platforms Washington now watches with considerable unease, are dual-use delivery vehicles. The cruise missiles it has developed domestically, the Babur and the Rod, extend that reach further still. This is not a primitive program. Pakistan has been a nuclear state since 1998, when it conducted 6 nuclear tests in direct response to India's own test series that same year. It has spent 26 years refining, expanding, and hardening that capability. Its warheads are not stored in one location. They are distributed, deliberately, across multiple sites, in a dispersal pattern specifically designed to survive a first strike and retain second strike capability. That design choice, dispersal for survivability, is the choice of a country that thinks seriously about nuclear war. Now, hold all of that in your mind, and add this. In January 2023, Pakistan's foreign currency reserves fell below $3 billion. That number sounds abstract until you understand what it means operationally. $3 billion represents approximately 3 weeks of import cover. Pakistan imports fuel. It imports food commodities. It imports the industrial inputs its manufacturing sector requires to function. At $3 billion, the country was weeks away from being unable to pay for the things that keep its 240 million people fed, employed, and alive. The International Monetary Fund has been engaged in Pakistan in some form continuously for most of the last 20 years. Pakistan has entered IMF bailout programs 9 times since 1988. 9. Not as an anomaly, as a pattern that tells you something structural about the relationship between the Pakistani state and economic stability, that no single government, no single policy change,
and no single bailout has ever been able to resolve. The reasons are not a mystery. They are documented, analyzed, and consistently ignored.
Pakistan spends approximately 4% of its GDP on its military. That number has been relatively stable for decades. What has not been stable is the economy required to sustain it. The industrial base is thin. The tax collection system is among the weakest in the region. Less than 10% of the population files taxes. Corruption indexes consistently place Pakistan in the bottom third globally. Foreign direct investment, which should be the engine of a developing economy's growth, has been declining as a percentage of GDP for most of the last 15 years. The political instability compounds every economic problem. In April 2022, Prime Minister Imran Khan was removed through a parliamentary no-confidence vote, the first successful removal of a sitting prime minister through that mechanism in Pakistani history. What followed was not stability. Khan launched a protest movement that drew millions into the streets. He was arrested, he was released, he was arrested again. His party's candidates were barred from elections. He ran his campaign from prison, using AI-generated speeches delivered digitally to crowds who gathered in person to watch a screen. The military, which has directly governed Pakistan for approximately half of its existence as an independent state, and has wielded decisive influence over civilian governments for most of the rest, is now navigating a situation it has never faced in this precise form. A deeply popular former leader who commands genuine mass loyalty, combined with an economy that cannot generate the growth required to buy social peace, combined with an external security environment that is deteriorating on multiple fronts simultaneously. The northwest border with Afghanistan has never been stable since the Taliban returned to power in 2021. Cross-border militant attacks have increased significantly. The Pakistani Taliban, distinct from the Afghan Taliban but operationally connected to it in ways that defy easy categorization, has escalated attacks on Pakistani security forces to levels not seen since the peak of the insurgency a decade ago. The eastern border with India sits in a state of managed hostility that has never truly stabilized since the partition of 1947. 2 nuclear-armed states, 3 wars, 1 unresolved territorial dispute over Kashmir, and a domestic political environment in both countries where nationalist pressure consistently pushes leaders toward confrontation rather than accommodation. This is the context in which 170 to 200 nuclear warheads exist, not managed by a confident, stable state operating from a position of security, managed by a state under simultaneous economic, political, and security pressure that would strain the institutional capacity of governments far more robust than Pakistan has ever been. In the years immediately following September 11, 2001, American officials were asked repeatedly, in hearings, in briefings, in off-the-record conversations, a single question: what is the plan if Pakistan destabilizes? The answers were always variations of the same general reassurance. The Pakistani military has robust command and control systems. The warheads are secured, the procedures are sound, there are safeguards, there are redundancies. The situation is being monitored carefully. What those answers always carefully avoided was a direct engagement with the underlying logic. Robust command and control systems are maintained by institutions. Institutions are composed of people. People operate within political environments, and political environments in Pakistan have never been more volatile than they are right now. The specific concern that keeps American nuclear security planners awake at night is not a conventional theft scenario, a small group of individuals breaking into a facility and walking out with a warhead. Modern nuclear warheads are not functional without authentication systems, arming codes, and technical sequences that require specific knowledge. Stealing a warhead does not automatically mean possessing a usable weapon. The concern that is harder to model, harder to plan for, and harder to discuss publicly is different. It is the concern about institutional capture.
What happens when the institution responsible for maintaining nuclear security itself begins to fracture along political, ideological, or factional lines? What happens when the officers responsible for command and control no longer share a unified chain of loyalty because the political crisis above them has split the military itself?
It has happened before in other contexts. It has never happened before in a nuclear-armed state under this specific combination of pressures. And Pakistan is not just any nuclear state. Pakistan is the nuclear state that produced A.Q. Khan. Abdul Qadir Khan was Pakistan's preeminent nuclear scientist. He was also, by his own eventual admission, and by the findings of international investigators, the operator of the most successful nuclear proliferation network in history. Through his network, nuclear weapons design information, centrifuge technology, and weapons-grade material reached Libya, North Korea, and Iran. That last destination is worth pausing on.
The technology that Iran used to begin its own enrichment program, the centrifuge designs at the heart of the program that now generates those 12-day breakout timelines, traces directly to the Khan network. The crisis the world is currently managing over Iran's nuclear program is, in a meaningful technical sense, a downstream consequence of decisions made inside Pakistan's own nuclear establishment. Khan was placed under house arrest in 2004 and pardoned by the Pakistani government. He died in 2021. But the network he built, the connections he established, and the precedent his operation created did not die with him.
No analysis of Pakistan's nuclear situation is complete without understanding the external architecture surrounding it, because Pakistan does not exist in isolation, and the pressures on its arsenal do not come only from within. China has been Pakistan's most consistent external patron for decades. The relationship is sometimes described as an alliance. It is more precisely a structured dependency. China has financed major Pakistani infrastructure through the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, a $62 billion investment program that is, in practice, a network of Chinese-built roads, ports, and energy infrastructure running from Western China through Pakistani territory to the port of Gwadar on the Arabian Sea. That port gives China something it has sought strategically for years: a warm water outlet that bypasses the Strait of Malacca, the narrow choke point through which most of China's maritime trade currently passes, and which the U.S. Navy could theoretically block in a conflict scenario. Pakistan's geographic position is, from Beijing's perspective, irreplaceable. China has also transferred nuclear technology to Pakistan directly. The transfer of reactor designs, of enrichment-related knowledge, of delivery system components, documented by multiple non-proliferation research organizations over decades, reflects a Chinese calculation that a nuclear-capable Pakistan serves as a permanent strategic anchor on India's western flank. India is China's most significant regional rival. Keeping India focused on the western border is a strategic service Pakistan provides to Beijing simply by existing as a nuclear-armed adversarial neighbor. This creates an extraordinary situation. China is simultaneously Iran's most important economic partner, Pakistan's most important strategic patron, and the country most interested in managing American power in the Indo-Pacific. Every element of that triangle is now under pressure simultaneously. India watches all of this with an attention that Western analysis consistently underestimates. India is itself a nuclear power. It maintains a declared no first use policy that its own strategic community debates internally. It operates a sophisticated ballistic missile program. And it is now managing a situation where the country on its eastern border, China, and the country on its western border, Pakistan, are both aligned against its strategic interests, while simultaneously, the broader Middle East conflict is disrupting the energy supplies that India's growing economy depends on. India imports approximately 80% of its oil,
A significant portion of that flows through the Persian Gulf region, now experiencing active military conflict. Every escalation in the Iran-Israel feud translates directly into economic pressure on 1.4 billion Indians. And economic pressure on India generates political pressure on Indian leadership to act more assertively on its own security concerns, which run directly into Pakistani and Chinese interests.
The Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, observe Pakistan's situation through a specific lens that Western coverage almost never captures. The Gulf has been one of Pakistan's most important sources of financial support for decades. Millions of Pakistani workers are employed across the Gulf states, sending remittances home that represent a meaningful fraction of Pakistan's dollar inflows. Saudi Arabia, in particular, has provided direct financial assistance to Pakistan multiple times during acute economic crises. But the Gulf states are also the countries most explicitly identified as the next candidates for nuclear proliferation if Iran acquires the bomb. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, stated publicly in 2018 that if Iran develops a nuclear weapon, Saudi Arabia will do so as well. He did not say Saudi Arabia would begin a program. He did not need to.
Pakistan already has one, and Pakistan and Saudi Arabia have maintained a relationship described by serious non-proliferation analysts for decades as a potential arrangement in which Saudi financing of Pakistan's program comes with an implicit understanding about future access. That arrangement has never been confirmed. It has never been officially denied in terms that close the question. What it means is this: if the regional situation deteriorates further, if Iran moves toward a declared nuclear capability, if American security guarantees in the Gulf continue to appear conditional, if the pressure on Riyadh to demonstrate its own deterrent becomes politically irresistible, the path of least resistance does not run through building a new program from scratch. It runs through Islamabad. The world has been focused on Iran's enrichment timeline. 12 days to break out. The centrifuges at Fordo spinning 60 meters underground. The IAEA issuing reports that use the word unprecedented in official documents. That focus is not wrong, but it has created a specific blind spot. Because the nuclear clock that should generate the most urgent alarm is not the one in Iran. It is the one in a country where the weapons are already built, already armed, already distributed across multiple sites, and currently sitting inside a state whose government has changed 3 times in 18 months, whose economy requires external life support to function, whose internal security situation is deteriorating on 2 borders simultaneously, and whose nuclear establishment has a documented history of proliferation that reshaped the entire global threat landscape. Pakistan is not about to collapse. That statement deserves to be made clearly. The Pakistani military has demonstrated for 75 years that it possesses the institutional resilience to stabilize situations that appear to be heading toward catastrophe. It has done so repeatedly. It has managed crises that would have broken less durable institutions. But institutional resilience is not the same as immunity. And the convergence of pressures currently bearing down on Pakistan, economic, political, internal security, external threat environment, regional escalation, represents a specific combination that has not previously been tested against this institution. Every analyst who has spent serious time studying nuclear security will say the same thing privately that they are careful about how they say publicly. The most dangerous nuclear situation in the world is not the country trying to build the bomb. It is the unstable country that already has it. Iran does not yet have a nuclear weapon. The world has devoted enormous diplomatic energy, military preparation, and public attention to ensuring it never gets one. Pakistan has 170 to 200, operational, dispersed, currently held by a state under pressure that no Western government has a credible plan to manage if the pressure exceeds what Pakistani institutions can absorb. That is the conversation the world is not having. That is the clock that predates the Iranian one. And unlike the centrifuges at Fordo, it does not require 12 more days to become the most dangerous object on the planet. It already is. The question that remains, the one sitting in every serious situation room from Washington to New Delhi to Beijing, is not when this becomes a problem. It is whether the institutions responsible for managing it will hold until someone finds the courage to address it directly. History does not reward the assumption that fragile things remain intact simply because breaking them would be inconvenient. The centrifuges spin, the warheads sit, and the world watches Iran.